Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! So, this happened about 1.5 years ago, but I recently heard the news on how far my revenge went. I was a Navy enlisted service member and was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan, for a few years before I got transferred back stateside. I worked in the main hospital that cared for service members and their beneficiaries. It's a small hospital, so everyone knows everyone. Shortly after I left, I caught wind of a new physician officer working in a radiology department. My friends would say he's horrible to work with, but that's nothing new. However, someone saw him print a letter and he left it on his desk and took a picture of it and sent it to me. He's requesting to move from enlisted housing to officer. Edit. Found out it's not a private letter. He did actually sent it to housing, and most of housing is ran by enlisted members. For context, military housing is available for those who are married, have a family, or are qualified based on their rank and depending on the military base itself. Typically, officer housing is much nicer than the enlisted. In Yokosuka, housing is basically the same all around because it's overseas, but most of the housing are apartments and each apartment complex is called a tower. Example, Fuji Tower. There are 9 towers and 2 are for officers since enlisted members outnumber officers by a lot. Now, one thing about the military, stuff happens. When getting stationed, it is the active duty member's responsibility to either apply for housing on and off base before arriving, depending on what is allowed. If there is limited space and you don't apply for housing on time, then you get put where there is space. So our new officer got placed in an enlisted tower. Mind you, enlisted members have families of their own and other officers have been placed in enlisted housing before without an issue. Here are some quotes in his letter. And yes, this guy has a PhD. I have many valid objections to living in a building of almost all enlisted and even many lower enlisted being an officer. There is a lot of crime, violent actions, drug use, and alcoholism that happen in enlisted housing. There is also sexual assault and other perverts. I have a good-looking family, a wife, and 2 daughters aged 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities. My family should be safe in housing that is with officers. Officers are much more respectable and these types of deviant activities are incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being commonplace. Other officer families will not want to visit us because our family lives in enlisted housing. My children need to make friends with other officer children. My wife needs to make friends with other officers' wives. I need to make friends with other officers. Forcing an officer to live in a large apartment building with almost all enlisted is unethical. You get the idea. So this guy basically looks down on all enlisted service members, assuming every single one of them are drug users, perverts, pedos, criminals, and so on. The kicker? He was an enlisted army member before going to officer school. In civilian terms, think of a manager that discriminates and calls all of his subordinates criminals, violent, alcoholics, pervs, drug users, and so on based on your job position, forgetting that some have a family and maybe aren't any of those things. And he not only has the authority to ruin your work life, he can ruin your personal life. Deny days off. Make you stay late, write you up if he doesn't like you, and not let you get promoted. Safe to say, everyone was pissed, and I have nothing to lose. I was separating soon and figured I'd have some fun before I go out. I created a burner Facebook account and posted the letter and the officer's picture on a popular military enlisted group page. Within 2 days, it spread like wildfire, but I wasn't done yet. The military has something called challenge coins. Think of trading cards but custom coins that come in many shapes and sizes. I designed one with his face and a big middle finger in the back. On top of that, I designed stickers to show how proud us deviants are. Other coin designs came from other people as well, but so far I think mine was more popular. I sold over 70 coins to the initial person who originally sent me the picture at a huge discounted price, so she can sell them for a profit for herself. So, the officer's face is everywhere because most people keep their coins displayed on their desks. No matter where the officer went to work, he would see his face on someone's desk. And since it didn't have his name on the coin, I can't officially say it's him. I sold more stateside and even some got sent to Europe. I made about 3K overall, which was nice. The story even got featured on the online naval newspaper and on 2 popular YouTube channels. And if you're military, you know the only time big military care is when it's too big to sweep under the rug. This story got the officer sent up to captain's mast, which is like Navy court. He tried to say his wife was the one that wrote the letter, but no one is buying it because her writing style is way worse. She even tried to take the fall, but no one believed her. They both ended up deleting all social media. Due to this, he got served 3 UCMJ articles, which basically are his offenses. But there is more. When you're in the military, you have a deadline on how long you can be a certain rank. If you don't pick up, then you're kicked out. And because he's new and got served UCMJ articles, he won't be up for promotion and therefore was involuntarily separated. Also, the officer program he went through pays for his PhD. When the military pays for your PhD, you have to serve 10 years to pay them back. If you don't complete 10 years, you have to pay the military back with money instead of time. So, he lost his job and now has to pay back the military for his PhD. And since it takes a while for the paperwork to have him and his family sent back stateside, you can bet he socially suffered because no one worked with him. Here is my petty revenge story from the 80s. My parents moved pretty often around a very small part of a Midwestern state, so I went to many tiny schools that varied wildly in how well they taught their students. In between my freshman and sophomore year, we moved to the largest town in our area. I went from being in a freshman class of just 25 students to a class of 300 students. It was a huge culture shock for me. None of the schools I had attended had any kind of drama club or classes. I had no frame of reference for any kind of theater type stuff, or many things that happened in the much larger school system really. So my English teacher was a drama class / club queen. Drama is her life. She works with local colleges to produce plays and stages yearly plays at the high school. She does community theater with all the local students and she has favorites. She is not shy about who she likes and who she hates. She would always fix the schedules, so her favorite drama kids got her English class because she was so integral to their life and crucial to their development, which I thought was extra weird. Drama club seemed a little culty. Also, sometimes she would expose a kid who had messed up in a play during class. She was a mean bully who played favorites. I did very well in my English classes with her. I was even bored somewhat by the curriculum. By about mid-year, this drama teacher pulled me aside and said I should have been in a tougher class. She said there were no spots in the high-track class, but that she would sit me in front of her desk. She would then teach me a little extra on the side so I wouldn't miss out. She said she would make sure I got into high track my junior year. I was pretty excited to be singled out in such a huge class. I was also excited at the idea of high track for my next year. I really enjoyed English classes generally. Well, that extra work was totally bogus. She handed me the Scarlet Pimpernel and told me to write a report. The book was boring and I wasn't getting extra credit for it. I didn't much like her as a teacher. I quit reading the extra work that was only for me to do in this class and just pretended like I hadn't agreed to it. She also quit talking about extra work, but she kept me front and center at her desk. I realized that next to me was her favorite student, the star of our little drama club. Let's call him Nick. She had been coaching Nick on drama since middle school and she would often tell us Nick would one day win an Oscar. Nick would always reply that he would thank her in his acceptance speech from the podium. She would smile and pat him and praise him. She had little secret jokes between themselves they would make middle class. It was really weird. So I come back from Christmas break and we are taking our first big test for the semester. When it happens, Nick casually leaned towards me and said in a quiet voice, "Hey, what is the answer to question 8? He's not speaking in a normal tone of voice, but he's not whispering. I am sitting right in front of the teacher's desk. I could have reached out and touched it with a foot. I looked at Nick and then looked at the drama teacher. I waited and waited. She sat there as if she hadn't heard a thing. None of the students near us said anything either. Totally surreal. If I got caught cheating, I knew my mother would tear me up. But did it count as cheating if I just told this guy the answer? So I dusted out the Gen X motto and said, whatever. I gave him the answer and waited for her to send us to the office or something. She just sat there so pleased with herself. I kept waiting for her to say something, and as the semester went on, Nick kept asking for the answers to more and more questions on tests. Now I'm reviewing what has happened in this class, and I'm realizing she figured out that I was good in this class and got me next to her future Oscar winner explicitly to help him cheat. As the semester goes on, I studied harder and went with the flow, but I was pretty mad. She had straight up used me because I was a new kid. I had a plan. A modest proposal, if you will. I started whispering the harder stuff to Nick so he wouldn't have to ask so much. I would even angle my paper so he could see better. All semester long, I wanted him to not worry about a single answer on any test. I wanted his cheating experience to be smooth as silk, and she was thrilled that I figured out what she wanted. Then it was finals time. Even though we were just high school students, we were in a university town, so it was modeled on the university style. The final had a huge weight on our overall grade. I gave him entirely wrong answers. Absurdly wrong answers, in fact, while she sat right in front of me. I guess he had long ago stopped doing anything with the class material because he just wrote everything I said down. She was a good actor because she must have been screaming inside listening to me. She never flinched or even raised her eyes to me. She never indicated she knew what was happening. I enjoyed it so much. It felt so great. The most fun I ever had taking a test. When the bell rang, she looked up and looked right at me. I just smiled and smiled right back at her. The aftermath. I have always wondered what she did about his test. There is simply no way she flunked him. I'm positive he failed that test badly. She got me back though. I was never allowed in AP English or high-track English my entire high school career. I was pissed, but it was worth it. Nick ended up going to New York because a stage called to him. He got on a few shows but ended up nowhere. The best part though, there was someone in that class who did make it pretty big in Hollywood. It wasn't Nick and it wasn't me. Just a quiet kid who sat in the back of the class the whole time. I don't think I ever spoke to them the whole time we were in school together. This kid was very introverted and not someone who you'd think Hollywood. But every time I see this person getting Hollywood accolades, I toast to Nick. Future Oscar winner and a drama teacher who nearly coached someone who made it. That must have really burned her up. I recently joined Out of Work Here Lady and your stories reminded me to share a few funny moments over the last year. Story 1. Last year, I, 26 female, was a PA student on my pediatrics rotation, and our office team decided to go out to a small sushi shop for a late lunch break at 2 p.m. Our MA was wearing hot pink scrubs, my classmate was wearing teal scrubs, and I was wearing black scrubs with my stethoscope stuffed into my front pocket. Our servers that day appeared to be mid-20s, wearing the store uniform of a white undershirt, black t-shirt, and a black pants/jeans. When we came in, the restaurant was empty as a lunch rush had passed, so we were seated in the first booth in front of the door. Towards the end of our meal, a duo of dudes, mid-20s, came in and sat in the booth right next to us. passing by us on their way in. When we were ready to leave, I got up to go wash my hands. As I walked past their booth, dude number 1 stopped me to ask, "Excuse me, miss. I ordered the edamame a while ago, but it hasn't come out yet. Can you check to see if it's still coming out?" I initially thought he was addressing a server in a room, but I did a quick look around to see there were no servers in sight and realized he was talking to me. I stopped, turned to them and smiled, saying, "Sorry, but I don't work here." I watched as dude number 1 looked at my face, then my scrubs, then my stethoscope, and his facial expressions simultaneously mirrored with visible confusion followed by flushed red ears. I kept walking towards the bathroom, and I heard dude number 2 gobbling, cackling at dude number 1 saying, "Bro, she's a nurse." Dude number 1 responded to him by muttering, "Dude, I didn't know." After I came back out and walked towards my booth, the dude stopped me again and apologized profusely, to which I told him it was no biggie and I hope they got their edamame soon. When we left, I told my team what happened, and we all got a good chuckle out of it. Story number 2. A few weeks ago, I was on a time crunch with about 2 hours to find a few farewell gifts for some colleagues. I was dressed for the mission with a black crop top, black leggings, and Avengers-themed Crocs. I ended up at a PNN an hour before closing to look for the perfect book for one of my colleagues who loves reading. I haven't been to PNN in a few years, so I was very lost but managed to find a good book after scouring the shelves for a hot minute. I called my boyfriend to tell him that I was on the way home soon and that I was speed walking towards the register to check out before the store closes. Halfway to the register and mid-phone conversations, I heard the guy saying, "Excuse me." I ignored it initially, but then I saw there was no one else around at the store. I didn't want to leave him around, so I turned around and the guy mid-30s said again, "Excuse me, I've been looking for..." Didn't hear what he was saying. And you guys kept moving stuff around so I can't find it. I looked at him, then my phone, then down at my clothes to make sure I wasn't wearing the store uniform, then back at him. This time I was visibly confused, saying, "Sorry man, I don't work here." He responded with an attitude saying, "What? Well, can you help me find it anyway or not?" I said nope, got lost here myself, bye. His face looked equally confused and offended, but it was glorious. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.